In our last videos, we've been discussing the numerological interpretations and impacts of years that I have felt are part of the shift, the great shift, the shift of ages, the transformation of consciousness, so many different names that have been given to it, with mine having seen the beginning of the shift starting in earnest around 1963, ending in at the end of the year 2062, with a midpoint of the year 2012, this year, which coincides, of course, with the end of the Mayan calendar, at least the accepted date of the end of the Mayan calendar being December 21st of 2012. And we've been looking at the vibratory signatures based upon numerology, Western numerology, of those particular years. We also have looked at since 1963 was the beginning of this shift, and it was considered to be a 19/1 year, 19 being a karmic debt number, meaning that in that year, we would, as a collective, as well as many people individually, be experiencing abuse of power, and the one part of that vibration indicating a beginning. We looked at then some 19/1 years that have followed 1963, being 1972, 1981, and 1990. And the next one coming is not until the year 2089, so we've got a little while to go. Now I want to look backward just a little bit at the 19/1 years that immediately preceded 1963. Why? I want to see if there is anything different about the energy of the years of the same vibration prior to my feeling of the beginning of the shift versus after that time of the shift or the beginning of the shift. So let's look at a couple of those years real quickly. One thing I will say about these years is they are much more challenging to find data for. When I was looking at the years after 1963, I remember most of them vividly. And so recalling what happened in 1972, I knew exactly what happened in 1972. Prior to 1963, it's a little more challenging to come up with. The first of those 19-1 vibrational years, prior to 1963, is what on earth happened in the news in 1954? Good question, right? Well, upon going back and looking at it, one of the first things I discovered was that a research team from the United Kingdom recently determined that April 11th, 1954 was the most boring day in the 20th century, that very little happened that year or that day in particular. So in 1954, what were the biggest news stories of the year? First big news story of 1954 was the United States basically, we're just going to put it in my terms, forced their way to control of some islands, the atolls, the Bikini Atoll being one of them, and forcibly moved the residents off certain islands, forcibly moved them to other places so they could blow them up. What was the point in that? They were just trying to prove how powerful we were. That's all it was up to, really. That's what the whole point of it was, to prove our power. Certainly there was an abuse of power, making people leave their residences and go somewhere else just because they wanted to do something. And in the midst of all that, one of the islands that these people had been moved from was completely obliterated from the face of the earth. Was there an abuse of power here? Certainly. Was it of a massive scale? No, there were really only a few thousand people that were directly affected, other than the psychological effect of, hey, look how powerful we are, look, we can blow you up in an instant. The other major news story of 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education. Now, this was the Supreme Court case which essentially began undoing the institutional wrongs that had been foisted against African Americans in particular, began undoing the Jim Crow laws. So what did we see here in terms of abuse of power? We were seeing with this actually kind of a reverse of the abuses of power from the past. So was there something to do with abuse of power? Yes, but to a certain degree it was almost in reverse.